right, looks like we are at the top of the hour, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. So wanted to welcome everybody to our webinar today, presented to you by Fortra. And topic is how to prevent and uncover suspicious activity on IBM. I know it's a topic that a lot of us are have in the forefront of our minds because cybersecurity is essential. Our businesses run on these servers, and we need to make sure that they're protected. The threats are out there, and we're going to be talking a lot about that and ways that you can discover what's happening on your servers. Again, we are recording this, so if you do have to step away and miss a couple minutes of the presentation, you'll be able to go back. If you do have any questions, please feel free to drop those into the questions panel. I'll do my best to answer those. But with that, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Sandy Moore. I'm a principal security consultant here at Fortra. I've been working on IBM for over 20 years and have focused on security for the majority of that. I've been working in my security consultant role in helping customers to find the best security solutions to meet their needs, evaluate their risk on their systems, and make sure that they are focused on the right things. So I enjoy doing this. I enjoy working with people, talking with people, and hearing user experiences so that I can then turn around and share that with the community. Fortra is the new face of help systems. What we've seen over the years is, help systems has a great reputation for really stepping up and assisting customers to become more secure, but also autonomous. But what we've seen is the customers' needs have changed. So with that, we've adapted and changed as well. And our focus is on cybersecurity and providing you with the best cybersecurity, regardless of what your requirements are. We're going to have the security tools to meet your specific needs. Fortra is a global company. We have over 3,000 team members across 18 countries. Our corporate office is still based in outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we've really covered the board on customers in virtually every industry. So we have a lot of experience and understand not only what the needs are in the United States, but globally. So really being able to take advantage of the knowledge that we have from all of our team members throughout the world to be able to provide with the best input, the best impact, and the best products to help you with your security requirements. Our flexible IT solutions are helping customers save time, money, as well as eliminate errors. So security, not only focused on IBM, but we've got Unix, Linux, and Windows. And a lot of customers don't realize we've really done a lot with acquisitions to bring forth the best security tools for the market and be able to provide you with coverage for your entire enterprise. Automation as well for Unix, Linux, Windows, in addition to our IBM tools, which really what we've been known for, but we've really expanded our offerings. Today, of course, we're going to be focused on IBM security and talking about what this really means for you and figuring out how we're going to not only prevent intrusions, but also be able to monitor when those attempts happen. We really do understand IBM security. We've actually been running a state of IBM security study for 20 years now. We've had this data collected, and it comes from customer systems. And what we've seen over time is that there's room for improvement, that every year we still have IBM shops that are needing to beef up the security on their servers. And so this is really an experience that we have shared with customers through our annual webinar, sharing those results so you can really see, what is the focus, what are the needs of the community, and we take that and ensure that we bring the right tools to market for you. Before we jump in, actually I want to get an idea from you guys. I'm going to shoot out a poll here and find out really what security projects you guys have going right now, because this is really the driver and what we are attempting to assist you with in making sure that we're focused on the right things. So whether you are looking at malware and ransomware protection, if that's a high priority, that's pretty common, securing your TCP/IP interfaces, SIM and syslog solutions, or maybe you're meeting cyber insurance requirements. I was just reading some information the other day that cyber insurance requirements are changing, and those renewals on those policies are not as straightforward as they were in previous years. And so, I've had a lot of feedback from customers that this is really where they're seeing that they're having to do some extra work in security on their systems. I think those cyber insurance providers were paying out a lot of claims for a while there, and they really have put the burden back on the customer to make sure that they are doing all the steps that are capable to prevent those attacks from happening. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll for you guys. Just want to see here. If you want to have another second there to respond, looks like a majority of you have replied here. So I'm going to go ahead and close that guy. All right, so it looks like we've got the majority of you are either not sure what your projects are currently, as well as cyber insurance requirements. With coming in third there, securing TCP/IP interfaces. So this is all a big part of it. It's certainly not one size fits all for every environment, and sometimes the tools that we use for one, it actually solves some other issues as well. So glad to hear this. All right, I'm going to keep that in mind. And this actually aligns, those poll results align with what we're seeing in our marketplace study. Cybersecurity is one of the #1 concerns in businesses. All right, so we have to talk about the threats and really understand what are we dealing with and what are the potential issues. The common threat sources really circle back to, there's basically the top 3 here. Black hat hackers. So these are the threat actors that are looking for money. It could be hacktivism. There's a number of different reasons why those hackers are going after our data. Monetary is a big one, but sometimes they're extremely intelligent people who just want to prove that they are better at what they're doing than we are at securing our servers, and so to prove a point. So it is absolutely an outsider threat that is going to create problems on our servers, so we need to address that. Insider threats are always a concern as well. So any insider, anyone who has access to your servers is going to have potential ability to compromise your servers and compromise the data. So those insider threats are growing, and sometimes it's not an intentional threat to the system. It's a misunderstanding of what they're doing, but very often it is intentional. Ransomware as a service is another big one. So this has really exploded the ransomware threat because ransomware is easy to get. So any threat actor that has decided that that is how they're going to make their money by holding data for ransom has the ability to purchase that and modify it a little bit and then launch their own attack. So it is absolutely one of the #1 threats to any environment. And included in that is IBM. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. We really need to see, what is at threat and what is at danger of being impacted, and it's our data. And between February 2005 and February 2022, we found that there was over 20,000 breaches reported in the United States. So huge number of breaches, and the impacted records totaled almost 2 billion. And this is just what's been reported. This is pulled together by privacyrights.org, and I was shocked by these numbers. I hadn't looked at it in a couple of years, and when I saw that yesterday, putting this together, I was just devastated. And these impacted records are across the board, and so really we have to think about how are we going to protect this data. I myself actually just received a letter the other day from one of my providers of insurance, and one of their vendors had a breach and my data was compromised. So, it happens to all of us, and it's just a matter of time before yours may be exposed as well. reason they're going after that data is that it is valuable. And so, there's a number of different reasons and different ways that this data is going to be compromised. So it's data theft, whether it's going to be sold on the dark web and used for malicious purposes. It could be held for ransom. So if you want your data back, you're going to have to pay money in order to get that access. And it's actually been taken to one step further. And we're seeing more so that not only are they holding the data for ransom, but they are threatening to expose it. So depending on what they've been able to get a hold of, it may actually be a big deal that there could be some very sensitive information that is in fact compromised. And then data destruction. Sometimes it's more about just destroying it. Maybe it's who you do business with that they want to attack you and destroy your information. It could be hacktivism. You've offended some nation state ransomware group and they're going to go after you. I actually just read about a denial of service attack against Telegram messaging platform, and because they pulled some data down. And so, this is really where it doesn't necessarily have to make sense to us as to why they're going after you. It's the fact that they are. And anyone and anything is a target. So you may think that you're the guy that just makes socks and that no one's going to go after you, but that is not the case. Everybody's a target. So we really need to start thinking about what we're going to do with that and how we're going to prevent that. Of course, power systems, this is something that we often think those are not going to be impacted. Nobody knows what an IBM is or AS400 is. Nobody knows what the green screen, it's old school and it's not going to be a problem. However, unfortunately, your power systems are just another server. These are servers that are within your network and it's part of the enterprise and very often the core server of the business. This has the crown jewels on it. And so it is the most valuable server within your environment. And it does happen. Over and over again, we see that ransomware hits the power servers. Whether you're the customer that had 500,000 files encrypted by ransomware and 248,000 copies of that ransomware dropped on their server, or the customer with their development system with 400,000 files encrypted and completely down and unavailable. It continues to happen. Just in the last month, I worked with another customer who had smaller impact with 185,000 files encrypted in their IFS by ransomware. So it does keep happening. It is truly just that other server that is going to be impacted if you are not paying attention to how it can get to the system and how they're going to be able to attack that server. So figuring out how you're going to create those layers and building out those strategies to prevent these attacks from happening. So let's talk about those strategies for prevention. How are we going to ensure that these IBMI is not going to be the victim of those attacks? So when we're getting started, really you want to start looking at defining your policies. Understand any regulatory requirements that you have that's going to dictate what you should be doing with security on the server, and understanding what layers need to be in place, whether it is a SOX requirement or if you have EPHI, private health information on your system, or if it's merely an internal security policy. Every customer should have a security policy that includes the IBMI and understands how security works on IBMI, because it's not a one-size-fits-all security policy. It has to take into account how the IBMI is used and the settings that can be provided there. Evaluate the settings on your server. So when you get started, you have to know where you're starting, right? So understanding what your current security settings are so that you can actually prioritize what your next steps are going to be. When we look at our security study, we've seen customer systems over the years, and I'll share some more data on that here as we go through. But really what we're seeing is that customers don't understand the security options that are available on the system, so they don't know what they need to change and how to actually get those settings correct. And then prioritizing. security can be a big project, and it is not something that everything needs to happen all at once. So prioritize what the most important things are, and then phase in the rest of your security layers. So ensuring that you knock down the most critical actions first, and then make sure that you follow up and finish that. Security is always best in layers. So that prevention is going to come from the layers of security that you put into place. And I can't emphasize that enough. There's no one thing that is going to make the server secure. Every piece counts, and every layer is going to help with that prevention of unauthorized access to your server. The first place where we start is with system configuration. And it seems like a no-brainer, but it's amazing. IBM really has that reputation of being the most secure operating system. And so one of the reasons why it has that reputation is because IBM has actually told us that. They've advertised it as an exceptional security. And I don't argue that. They have the ability to be the most secure server. However, it does not ship that way. You have to actually take steps to make that system secure and to actually add the options that they allow for to be able to make that system secure. And we call it around here, it's a securable system. And so, getting together those pieces and ensuring that each one is in place is where you're going to get to the secure server. Now, with those system configurations, being able to implement that, there's a couple of things, actually a whole list of things that we really recommend that you put some focus on. So when it comes to system configuration, staying current is critical. So making sure you're at a current OS level and that you're applying patches as necessary. Vulnerabilities happen. Just in June, there was a DDM vulnerability that actually allows a remote attacker to execute CL commands on the system as Q user. So this exploitation of DDM architecture is a huge vulnerability. It actually ended up with a CVE score of 8.6. That's pretty high. And so there are patches for that. So making sure that you are staying current is absolutely critical. Any operating system, it's all about keeping it current and patching those vulnerabilities so that they are not taken advantage of. Many of the major breaches that we've seen in the news have circled back to vulnerabilities that weren't patched, it was preventable. So don't be the guy that says, oh man, I wish we'd actually gone ahead and patched that before this all happened. You want to make sure that you patch it and say, yep, we didn't have to worry about that piece. Leverage those controls that are available on the IBM I. So there are a ton of things that you can add, all the system values. There are some ways that you can ensure that the system is not going to allow certain activity. So protecting the integrity of your operating system with some of those system values so that you can, in fact, ensure that someone's not going to load a patch program onto your system. And implement object level security. So this all starts at the object level security. So does every user need update authority to all of the objects and databases on the system? Probably not. So really trying to back that down to ensure that users only have access to what they need access to, as opposed to let's just give it all to them and let's rely on that green screen menu to restrict what the user is going to be able to do. Strengthening your user profile security is critical as well. So ensuring that you have good password settings on those user profiles. Ensure those user profiles don't have too much authority on the system. So pay attention to special authorities. Group profiles are infamous for giving entirely too many users too much authority on the server. So making sure that you are regularly evaluating what access do users have and how are we controlling what they're able to do. Make sure they don't have command line authority. That user doesn't need to be able to run commands on the system, don't let them. So all of these steps with those users can ensure that your users don't have too much room to be able to do things that are inappropriate. You also want to think about cleaning up old user profiles. Users that have been gone for 6 years don't need to have a profile on the system. Simply disabling that profile does not always prevent it from becoming a part of the problem. So making sure that you're actually proactively managing your user profiles. The threat actors, those hackers, don't have their own profiles. They're using your users' profiles. So ensuring that you've got good security around those user profiles is critical. Last one here is implementing IBM's built-in intrusion detection system, so you can mitigate those external intrusions. So sometimes this is seen as the end-all be-all. This is all you have to do is add this IDS and activate it, and you're good to go. This is only going to be good against external intrusion. So this is not your internal threats. These are not the users that have clicked on the link that now have accidentally downloaded something into your system, into your environment, and are attacking your server. These are going to be those spoofing attacks, these denial of service attacks, restricted IP protocol, scan events, and traffic regulation events. So those are truly those external threats to the system. If your IBMI is not externally facing, you're not likely to have, this isn't going to give you a lot of benefit. But if it's there, it's included in the system, you might as well activate it and use it so that you can see if there is any activity around those specific types of intrusion attempts. We need to do more than that. And so really this is when these additional layers are going to come in to give you the better visibility and control over what is happening. All right, so another layer of prevention is data encryption. So when you think about it, you've got valuable information on your servers. Whether that information is regulated, whether it's PCI information or that falls under HIPAA, or you've got PII data, employee information, whatever information is valuable to your organization, not necessarily, it may not be on one of those lists of highly sensitive data that is regulated, but it's something that's important to your business. So think about this, any data that is breached is going to be unusable if it can't be read. So if you encrypt the data, unauthorized access to that data is not going to be very valuable to the threat actor that was able to get a hold of it. So you're protecting the data and ensuring that it is not going to be compromised. However, you have to be careful in how you do encryption on the system. Disk encryption is great if your disk is stolen. Highly unlikely that someone's going to be able to steal the disk and plug it into another tower. So using field level encryption to encrypt the data at rest is your best option, because the disk encryption, user signs on with valid credentials, they're automatically going to be able to decrypt that data. The threat actor doesn't have their own credentials, remember that. So they're going to use one of your credentials and you're going to be able to decrypt it and the data's compromised. So with the field procedure programs, it's an easy way to encrypt that data at the field level. So you're protecting the data as it's stored on the system, and you will be able to authorize how users are able to access the data. Does Sandy, the manager, get to have that full view of that data? Does she get a partially masked view of the data, or is she has no business seeing our employee salaries? So it would be fully masked for her. So really being able to take it to that next level and protect the data before it's even breached. So we know that it is not going to be compromised and usable. Got some tools for that. You know, let's look at our PowerTech encryption, makes that process easy configuration. So really being able to add that without doing a lot of extra work, no program changes. So a good layer to consider to protect that sensitive information on your system. All right, another layer, virus and ransomware protection. So, you know, ransomware is a huge threat. This is not going away. It's not a matter of if you will have a ransomware attack in your environment, it's when and how big is it going to be? What is going to be compromised? And further down the road, how are you going to recover from it? So that's another conversation for another time, but you have to start thinking about this and how are you going to manage this? The viruses can provide an open door to your server where someone can, in fact, open up communications and invade your environment. The IBMI, unfortunately, acts as a very happy host to that malware. It will host it out to your users. If you're running a web server, it'll host it on the web server. It doesn't show any symptoms of being infected, so it's perfectly happy to share it out. So doing native virus scanning is a critical piece of this. So ensuring the server's not hosting that malware, or if you've got an impacted workstation that's trying to infect the files on your system, you're going to be able to prevent that. Using non-native virus scanning is dangerous. It does actually create more problems that it solves because it, in fact, will require you to open up access to an all object profile through the root directory from a workstation. So now you've compromised the data further by opening up a wide open door to the server that is dependent on someone babysitting it to ensure that it's working properly. You also want to make sure that you're using an exit program that's going to monitor the authorized access to your integrated file system and actually block attacks if it sees a malicious access pattern. So is that user doing a programmatic rapid read, rename, encrypt, and delete of your stream files? And being able to interpret that user's actions and then be able to stop that attack. So effectively reducing the blast zone and ensuring that, in fact, the system is not going to be significantly compromised in that. I actually just got off the phone this morning with a company that is at the tail end of it. Unfortunately, they paid a huge ransom and they are still doing cleanup on their system. So PowerTech Antivirus with our anti-ransomware functionality can provide that additional layer to be able to securely monitor and scan the system, ensuring that it's not part of the outbreaks. Exit point security, this is a no-brainer for me. This is really that firewall, transactional firewall for the IBMI that allows you to be able to see who's connecting to the system and what they're doing and decide if this is appropriate or not and lock them out if they do not need to be in there. So exit programs create a great layer of security. So we do have a tendency to rely on the obscurity of the IBMI. Nobody knows how to use it. It's just the green screen. And using those application menus and command lines to protect the system. However, threat actors are not going to set up client access and establish a green screen and then try to break through your menus. They are going to use one of the traditional PC interfaces. So taking advantage of the file server, FTP, DDM, talked about that briefly with that CVE that was released. So this is really where you're going to be able to control the access. Think of it this way. If a user has read authority to your data and they only go through the application, you're good. They're not going to get very far. However, if they are able to use one of the other PC interfaces, they have that same ability. They can download the data and walk away with it in a different format. So it's essential that this layer acts as that firewall for the system to determine who can get in, how they can use the system, where they're going to be able to go, and you have a record of it. This is that intrusion layer where you're going to be able to see who failed to connect through FTP and how many times have they attempted to connect to our server through FTP. You don't have that visibility without exit programs in place. The system itself does not collect this data. It doesn't see it. You're basically running blind to this activity through these interfaces. So having exit programs to be able to give you the visibility to who's using it and how it's being used, and then be able to choose if that is an appropriate way for that user to connect. Exit Point Manager from our PowerTech Exit Point Manager is going to provide that ability, give you that visibility and control and the auditability. So being able to prevent unauthorized access and then prove that in fact you prevented it. All right, last layer of prevention I'm going to talk about today is multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication has played a big part of stopping threats to the server, because that compromised user profile and password requires a second layer of authentication. So effectively stopping the casual abuse of someone else's credentials. And it has played an important role in that and can be extremely effective. So adding multi-factor authentication to IBMI, especially for your administrators, users who have significant authority to the system, is going to give you that additional functionality to ensure that this is not just Bob, my developer, this is actually Bob, because now I have actually taken it from just his password to ensuring that we have authenticated him against the system. This is doable on the IBMI. You can do green screen authentication. You can do any of those TCP interfaces as well. So Sandy's connected to the file server. Is it really Sandy? Yes, it is. Oh, no, wait a minute. Sandy's not sitting at her workstation. It couldn't possibly be her. So is this in fact a ransomware attack that's taking advantage of Sandy's connection to the file server? So ensuring that it does not actually cannot proceed. PowerTech multi-factor authentication has that functionality to provide you with that second factor of authentication, so that we can not only provide that additional security layer, but a lot of cyber insurance requirements have now included MFA in that. So great way to do that final check. Is this really them? And if they don't validate it, they're not getting onto the server at all. So multiple layers, multiple ways of actually getting that system to that more secure state, so that we don't have those intrusion attempts. They're not successful. We'll be able to prevent them. Now, I probably thinking, wow, do we really need to think about all this? And is this really important? Absolutely. When we look back at our state of IBMI security study data, we've seen some pretty alarming results. And last year's data, or this year's data, shows we had on average 122 root all object profiles on these servers. So that's a lot of users on servers that have the ability to delete the operating system. So huge security impact there. Using those system values that IBM provides, 30% of the systems we evaluated didn't have the security level 40 minimum shipped level from IBM. They're back leveling it so that there's actually loopholes in the authority on the system. Only 35% of the systems that we evaluated are actually monitoring, controlling access to those PC interfaces, those FTP, ODBC, file server, and only 13% are actually doing that server level malware protection. So there's definitely room for improvement, as I mentioned. This is really where we want to start ensuring that the server itself is protected. It can't just rely on the other layers in your enterprise, because those layers can and do fail. These attacks wouldn't continue if they weren't able to get around them. So really good use case for adding those layers of security, so that we in fact know and can actually prevent that unauthorized access to those servers. All right, so how are you going to know about it? So detection itself, so having the exit programs in place, being able to see that, you're going to be able to see the activity. However, you need to monitor that data. So turning on auditing on your server, ensuring that you have that data available. So if you have your audit journals configured, you want to make sure you're keeping the data long enough and you actually look at it to see what's happening. So are there new profiles that have been created with all object authority? Okay, why and how are they being used? Who's had invalid sign-in attempts? I had a customer server I looked at, they had over 10 million invalid sign-in attempts for one user profile, and they had no idea that it happened. So you've got to monitor this recorded data. You have to know what's going on. So when it does happen, you can react quickly. in any of these attacks, it's all about your reaction time. You react quickly, you are going to be able to prevent the larger portion of the damage. So the faster you cut users off, the more protection you're going to have. So alerting when these incidents happen. So not only having that data recorded, but to let people know that something has happened. You have a user who gets blocked by the anti-ransomware engine. That user's been blocked. They're doing something suspicious. It's ransomware. You've got bigger problems in the network as well. So you want to consider not only alerting, but tying all of this IBMI security events into your SIM. So if you've got a SOC, make sure that they get this data as well, because it can give them a heads up. And time is of the essence in these attacks to react quickly and shut it down. So our PowerTech SIM agent can get that data off to your SIM and ensure that all of the critical security information, not just the IBMI team, but your entire security team needs to know about it as well. You might also want to establish a good backup and recovery plan. I know we all do backups. However, you need to make sure that your backups are secure. Backups are often destroyed in attacks so that you can't recover. They don't like it that you can just go restore the whole system and, hey, we're not going to pay a ransom. So they're going to try to cause the issues with those backups. And recovery from a ransomware attack is very different than recovery from hardware failures. So in a hardware failure, you get disk, you restore the system, you're good to go. But with these attacks, you need to ensure that you have all the pieces you need to restore that data. So you definitely need to consider how this is being managed and have a plan in place. And you need to run through it so everybody knows what their role is and where they're going to be able to find this information and how it's going to recover. It'll make this process a lot easier. You can't rely on high availability, because if you have a system that is compromised by ransomware, those changes to those files are going to replicate over to your HA system. So it needs to be considered. So lots of ways that you're going to be able to, once you start actually adding those layers of security, it's going to give you the information that you can actually use to see what's happening and be able to react quickly and be able to recover. All right, so I always have a call to action here, and if you've ever joined one of my webinars, you've probably heard me say this, but you have to start knowing what is actually set up on your server. So I always recommend starting with a risk assessment. So being able to evaluate the current security posture on your system so you can make informed decisions and prioritize those actions. That was one of our goals, was to prioritize what projects are going to come first. So how do you know where to start? And is where you want to start make the most sense? And is it going to be the lowest hanging fruit to get you to that more secure state on your server and be able to prevent that unauthorized suspicious activity on your server? So we have a security scan that you can run. It is actually a free tool, not very many free tools out there anymore. And it evaluates 6 different areas of security on your system. Not only can you evaluate that security settings on the system, you'll be able to actually produce the report from it and share it with your colleagues, your management, and actually be able to make decisions on what you need to do next. I have customers do this, that they have done a ton of work on their servers for security, and we actually do a 1-hour review with you and help you walk through and interpret the results. Every customer I've ever done this with, and I've done over 1,000 of these security scans, and everybody discovers something that they can do to further their security posture on the system. Even if it's a small change, it can make a big difference. So I invite you to actually run one of these security scans if you haven't done so already. If you have done one in the past with us, I invite you to rerun it. See what changes you've made and what kind of impact they've had on your risk posture. So really being able to say, all right, we've done this, this looks better. Now what do we need to work on? So it's a big deal. This is the data that actually drives our state of IBM I security study. So this is where this data comes from, actual security settings on those servers pulled together into this our report that we do every year. So definitely best place to start in deciding what you're going to do next. All right, I'm going to throw out one more poll here for you guys. So that security scan I've been talking about, want to know if in fact you would be interested in doing this. If you haven't already, or if you've, like I said, if you've already done one of our security scans and you are interested in going back and looking at it again, let me know, and we're happy to do that. Sometimes it takes a couple of runs at it before you can get support for those projects to actually get that system, that security project going. Understanding IBMI is an important piece of it. One of the things we've seen is that auditors and IT departments don't necessarily understand how all of their security settings translate to IBMI. So this can help to really bring forth that agenda. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll there. If you responded on that one, we'll be sure to get back to you and get you set up. All right. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw those into the questions panel. We are coming up at the top of we'll schedule this for 45 minutes. So if I'm unable to answer your question, we'll follow up with you. But you're welcome to visit our website. We've got a ton of resources out there, videos and trial downloads. If there's any of the tools that I talked about today that would be of interest to you and aligns with your current projects, but product information, data sheets, how-tos. You can also find the request form for our security scan. Whole host of information. Hopefully this is going to provide you guys with some food for thought and provide you with some motivation to get going on some of these projects and to give you some ideas on ways you can not only uncover and have visibility to suspicious activity on the system, but also in the ability to prevent it. Really, we want to make sure that those layers are in place and that you're able to secure the server. This is a great platform. It has a lot of support in the community, and we want it to continue. So making sure that it is a reliable, safe, secure server is the goal here. So hopefully you guys got some good information about that. Oh, looks like got one question here. Looks like somebody who is actually set up to talk with me this afternoon. I'm looking forward to that too. So Brooks, appreciate your feedback there. It is absolutely something that we love to communicate with customers and to put together ideas and figure out how to tackle customers' issues. All right, looks like we're at the top of our time. So if there are any other questions, feel free to reach out. You can send an email to info@fortra.com, and you're able to, if you want to put in the subject line, subject to the webinar or at my attention, you're welcome to do that. You can also email me directly. My email address is sandy.moore@fortra.com. Really appreciate you guys taking the time today. I know we're all busy and there's a lot of things going on in everybody's lives. So taking that moment to go through and talk about this is a pleasure and an honor. So thank you all. You guys have a great day. We'll be talking with you soon.